In a way, beauty is defined by humanity. Words and notation cannot adequately define nor describe what is beauty, and no person can understand beauty before seeing it. Beauty has no tangibility, no essence. It is simply a sense of comparison. The greater the disparity of beauty is between two objects, the greater that object is. Which begs the question, in a perfect world, can beauty even exist? I don't know. This is a video about jazz piano. The history of piano begins, as all things do, in Italy. Created by
Bartolomeo Cristofori.
around the turn of the 18th century, it was a continuation of the harpsichord. The harpsichord had its place, but musicians became increasingly frustrated by its limitation in dynamics. The mechanism involved plucking a string, which is hard to vary. Luckily,
Cristofori.
came up with a solution: hammers. The piano has several major parts. The most standard grand pianos have a keyboard filled with the black and white keys, which are connected to hammers. The whole mechanism is referred as the action. Sound is amplified by the soundboard, which is many strips of thin but strong wood. The strings are typically situated on a cast iron plate. The strings are held in tension by the tuning pins on the pin block. When the key is struck, the hammer rises, hitting an internal string which reverberates through the case of the piano to create music. Deep down, however, musicians knew the piano had a greater purpose. The composers tried many ways to coax out the potential of the instrument. They tried classical music, slapstick comedy, aquariums, whatever this is, sometimes playing nothing at all, with no avail. It would seem musicians could never accomplish anything until the blues form is one of the most important in jazz history. While it was first played on the easily accessible guitar, it moved its way to piano. The first blues put in early spirituals and field hollers from slave times to music. The most influential form of blues is the 12-bar blues, which makes up a chorus. A basic blues chorus will use the 1, 4, and 5 chord, where every phrase starts on a different harmony. While the history of early jazz is muddied, Jelly Roll Morton's blues music shaped the beginning of the genre. Another form of jazz that evolved was ragtime. Ragtime, called ragged time because of its syncopations, was originally played on the banjo. Ragtime form comes from marches, which are composed of strains. Strains are a composition of melody and repeated chord progression, and many different strains can make up a rag, to which Scott Joplin was the king. A good way to identify ragtime is to listen to the left hand for a syncopated bounce, like this. Really makes you want to dance, right? Speaking of which,
Oh baby, it's the 20s. The economy's up and jazz is ready to get down.
the swing period is characterized by the New York style and energy. Jazz, characterized by its ability to change, evolved alongside the Great Migration and innovations like the radio and recordings. Ragtime was given a New York accent and is now called stride. Stride piano has two main components. On the left hand, the ragtime bounce is modified, with a low note playing on the first and third beats, and a jump up to an octave and a third on the 2 and on the 4. The left hand looks like it's striding up and down the piano, which takes some pretty big hands to pull off. On the right hand, there are embellished melodies filled with glissandos and grace notes, giving the stride piano a bolder, brasher, and messier tone. Some of the best jazz artists came from this era. Duke Ellington, James B. Johnson, Art Tatum, and Count Basie came from stride and influenced jazz for the years to come. But why change? Everything is going so well. The year is 1937. The Depression has all but killed swing. Where jazz once struggled finding an audience, now it struggles in finding inspired musicians. And Charlie Parker's mad.
Hey Charlie, that was great, but can you play us some normal jazz?
With the dance halls and speakeasies victims of the Depression, it was time for jazz to take a risk. That means we're going to throw in some nasty harmonies and tritones into our piano. Thelonious Monk, alongside having the coolest album cover to date, was influential in creating the advanced harmonies involved with the bebop era. In this piece, titled Thelonious, listen to the advanced playing that is more than the sum of its parts. Bebop piano is characterized by its chromatic scales, fast chord progressions, and dynamic improvisations. You're going from this to this, and your Roman numerals are going like this. A popular piano style during this time period is boogie woogie. Boogie woogie comes from another jazz hotspot, Kansas City. Now, it's important to recognize that the places and times I've talked about are generalizations of the era. Truthfully, there's a lot of overlap between styles. Boogie woogie came out of swing, but evolved to be a foundation of rhythm and blues. Like the others, boogie woogie can be identified primarily by its bass line. The left hand constantly walks up and down the chord, which is very reminiscent of the 12-bar blues style. With stride, ragtime, and boogie woogie covered, we can now move on to the bebop era sent jazz in a spiral of innovation and complexion. It set the standard that jazz could and would be anything. And so the way piano was played changed as well. Jazz only becomes limited by the questions you can ask. Modal jazz says, what if we changed the mode, not the chord? Free jazz says, what if we got rid of music standards? Latin jazz says, what if Spanish people could play jazz? And now we've hit a bell curve, where amateurs don't play by the rules because they don't know them, and visionaries don't play by the rules because they wrote them. And maybe that is the meaning of beauty.